The Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl have officially come and gone, and the 2025 NFL Draft is looming in April. We are one weekend away. Actually, I'm recording this on Tuesday the 4th. You'll probably see this on Tuesday the 4th. We are almost at the Super Bowl. And after the Super Bowl, we will know our official 32 team first round lineup, or first round order, I mean. And this is going to be my first mock draft of the season because we pretty much know where everybody's going to be. Obviously, we don't know 31 and 32 just yet, but we know kind of the landscape for the majority of the league. And I felt like now that the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl have happened, this was a good time to do it. Now, a few things to get out of the way. If there's kind of a background white noise of some kind, I'm just call it a back white ground noise. I have a fan on right now in my room, just for the sake of being hot and warm. I also have a fan on because it distracts the flies that have been infesting our house. I want to say it because, or I wanted to say that because if you might see me swat or attack at any point, there's a fly. It got really warm yesterday. It got like a 30-degree drop from yesterday to today, causing flies to run rampant. Yesterday, the sun came out for a while. They all went nuts, and I live out in the middle of the country, so they were here. Now, a few things. This will include some trades. I'm not 100% up to snuff on what are the kind of biggest rules of trading draft picks. You know, what teams consider valuable than others. But in a landscape where Luka Doncic can get traded in the NBA, anything can happen. So I'm just going to throw shit together. Now, by saying that there are trades available, I am going to put the Cleveland Browns in a trade at some point for Myles Garrett that I believe would get them another one of these first round picks. And whenever I look around the league at teams that could use an edge rusher, that have a pick that the Browns would like and could potentially facilitate moving on from their first round pick, and also, like basically pay him and maintain being a good squad while also trading away that first round pick. There's a few teams that I look at immediately. And the one that I think, for the sake of this particular mock draft, I am going to rock with, and I do think this would be a very, not shocking move, but a very fun move, is the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions have no real need to bring in another first rounder, and after the injury to Aiden Hutchinson, you don't know what he's going to be next year, but putting those two together for time to go makes me very happy. Time to go is not a phrase. We are going to give them back. I considered the idea of, if a team would give up a player, but in the NFL, a lot of trades are more so pick for player, and I don't know if there's anybody player-wise that the Browns would be like, oh yeah, I need that guy. And there's a lot of great players, but if you're the Lions, you're not giving up Kirby Joseph, you're not giving up Brian Branch just to get Myles Garrett, when you can give them 28, next year's first, and your sixth from later this year. Or actually, yeah, that's your sixth right here. Let's see. We'll force this trade just because really the only thing that matters in this deal, like I said, is just the pick. If you dive too deep into what I just did there, don't. Because to be honest, I literally just did that to get Myles Garrett on the Lions, where Detroit gets another first round pick, or Cleveland gets another first round pick, excuse me. And obviously the Lions have to pay up a little bit more than the average team because they're trading all the way back from 28. But I do feel like because of Myles Garrett's contract and him being, he is pushing 30, that there are going to be a handful of teams in the top 10 or so that don't feel like their pick is worth trading for Myles Garrett. But this will open the door for us to have a more fun mock draft. Now, let's get into the mock draft. And I want to say shout out to PFF. Shout out to Trevor Sikkema in particular. This is his big board that we're going to be using. This is kind of how the MDS works, is it is Trevor Sikkema's mock draft, or not mock draft, but big board loaded in here to the mock draft simulator. It does go up to 7 rounds, so if you're interested in it, get a PFF Plus subscription, and you can do a 7-round mock draft. You can read his big board. You can kind of become your own expert in a way. Now, for the Titans, as after the experience of Will Levis that we just had, They came out and they said that they're not going to pass up on a generational talent if a generational talent is in front of them. And I don't hate that they came out and said that, because I do think Travis Hunter is a guy that, because of his two-way ability, you could consider generational. But I think when they sit down and they evaluate not only their room, but also the quarterback free agent class, they're going to reflect on themselves and realize that it's going to be another year of going into the season with Will Levis and Mason Rudolph if they don't draft a guy at number one. So I think with that situation that they have at hand, they will go Cam Ward out of Miami. Cam Ward's electric. Cam Ward's one of those guys that I do think has the arm strength, the mobility skills, the size, all of these things to play at the NFL level. He's going to be 23 as a rookie. He has plenty of college experience. I think that's one thing that Cam Ward will have going for him over almost any quarterback in this class. Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix just kind of proved to you that having a lot of college experience, especially in the transfer era, where a lot of guys are getting to learn multiple playbooks, this kid got better every single year, and he's already a 4 or 5 year starter from his college days, and he's played at multiple levels and been good at all of them. So I think this is a pick where the Titans' ceiling immediately goes up, and I think their floor goes up too, because I think this gives you the opportunity. You can try to trade Will Levis, do what the Steelers did, do what the Commanders did, trade your former starter for a 4th-round pick in this year's draft, get Cam Ward to be your new quarterback. You can rock with Cam Ward in a backup. You can use that extra pick to add depth to your roster that does have some definite holes. And you can set Brian Callahan up pretty good, because I think with Cam Ward and potentially like a wide receiver drafted on later in the first round, they could put together a pretty damn good offense. Now, we traded away Myles Garrett, and the reason why we traded away Myles Garrett is because now you have 2 first-round picks, a future first-round pick, and in that scenario, let's say they get a boatload of picks with it. And I think this is a Browns team that also needs a quarterback, but I think Cam Ward's the only guy that I would take if I was them because of the situation they're in. I don't know if bringing in Shedeur, I think bringing in Shedeur raises their floor big time, but I think the way the Browns are going to go into this offseason, they're going to be looking at the free agent quarterback market, which is basically just boiled down to either Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, which at this stage is probably going to be Russ, and then it's boiling down to Kirk Cousins as a guy that you can potentially go out and get. I think they're going to get Kirk Cousins because of his familiarity with the type of offense that Kevin Stefanski likes to run. And I think if I was them, I would draft Abdul Carter. You go out, you replace Myles Garrett pretty much instantly. And in the process of that, you get cheaper at the position while also maintaining potential talent at the position. And edge rusher is one of those spots that if you trade away a guy like Myles Garrett, you need to bring in someone to replace him, and you can't just live without him type of thing. Like, it's not like a wide receiver or a running back where you can just try to patchwork it after. You need that guy. Bring him in. You can try to get a quarterback later in the draft. Now they have that 28th pick if you really fall in love with one of the other quarterback prospects. Or you can just say, hey, let's just load up on talent now, and then we'll bring in a Kirk Cousins for a bridge year, or we'll bring Jameis Winston back, or we'll bring in Gardner Minshew, or just somebody like that can at least win 8 or 9 games and maybe give you a chance for a wild card spot while you figure out who your next QB is going to be. Now, for the Giants, they are in a situation where they have nobody. The Browns at least have a roster that I think is competent enough where if they were to go quarterbackless, they could still win some games. The Giants don't even have that. And I think it's really less about me liking Shedeur Sanders, because to be honest, I think this is actually a really kind of a tough fit for him. I don't like him behind their O-line. But you go get Shedeur Sanders because you know that the fan base can't go another year without drafting a QB. Now the question is, the Patriots. So this is something that I saw. I believe it was that franchise guy did this in his latest mock draft, which came out yesterday. You can trade back with the Jaguars if the Jaguars want to make sure they get Travis Hunter over the Patriots and still get Shedeur. And in that scenario, I think that is going to happen. Now, it doesn't have the Jags listed as a team that's interested, but this is what it would be. It would be very simple, 3 for 5, right? And the Jags give them 70 for 133. This is what we'll do here. We'll make it very simple, and then we'll give them a future third. Basically, what this would do is it would give the Giants more depth ability. You get another top 70 pick to move down 2 spots. Then you get a future pick that can kind of help you with your depth situation. We're going to force that trade. Like I said, don't buy in too much to what the trades are themselves. Just buy into where the teams are going. But the Giants and the Jaguars flip, so the Jags can get Travis Hunter, two-way player, electric at corner and at wide receiver. If you look at the coverage snaps, you can see kind of what he was looking at. This is kind of his coverage rating here. PFF does have him listed as a corner, so his wide receiver ratings aren't going to come up. But I can tell you right now, this 90 grade, which is one of the best in the sport last year in college football, his wide receiver grade was just as good. He was a phenomenal wide receiver. I personally think he's more talented at wide receiver, but more valuable at corner. And I think the Jags are a team that need a little bit of both of those positions. You have BTJ on offense. You have, Gabe Davis, Christian Kirk, these guys that will be cut or will be restructured. You're not really looking into the future of your wide receiver room as a need, but you're not looking at it as set either. But corner is a big thing because outside of Tyson Campbell, I think they could improve pretty much everywhere else in their corner room. Now, O-line is definitely a play for the Jags, especially if we get to, they don't trade at all, they just stay at 5, or even if they were to trade back with, let's say, the Jets, let's say Aaron Rodgers retires, the Jets want to go up for Shador, something like that, they could be in the market for Will Campbell, who I think can play guard. But instead, you have Travis Hunter, go get Travis Hunter. You have a guy that will be elite at one of 2 positions that you're going to really, really need. And could be elite at both of them if he really stands out like that. Now, the Patriots represent one of the most interesting teams for me to kind of decide on, because Will Campbell, for the sake of Drake May, Will Campbell is a pick that you kind of need to make. But Ted McMillan is one of the absolute best players in this class. And I think that wide receivers in the modern era get picked highly whenever they're that good. Ted McMillan is a legitimate, 6'5", 212 with unbelievable hands. I mean, he had 7 drops on 130 targets. That's a pretty good ratio to me. It's not like it's the best drop rate ever, but it's a pretty good ratio to me, especially whenever you look at the type of throws he's trying to catch and the type of catches he is making. This is a guy that they played everywhere in this Arizona offense, and he was fantastic every single time. One of the stats on PFF here that I really, really always liked is that they show you the average depth of target. And it's only 13.7 because they do give him screens once in a blue moon. They do give him short yardage. He'll catch, a comeback route, a curl route, these number one wide receiver type of routes where he's a guy that I do think can give you 8 to 10 targets for 6 catches a game in his rookie year. I've seen Justin Jefferson mentioned about Ted McMillan. I've definitely seen a lot of Mike Evans. He's a great player, and I think it becomes the Joe Burrow meme from a couple years back of Penei Sewell or Jamar Chase. Obviously, they take Jamar Chase. It works out in the end, but I think for Drake May, I want them to get Ted McMillan really bad. Like, I want them to get Ted really bad. So, that's what we're going to do. Ted McMillan's going to go to the Patriots. I just think he's too damn good, because I might do a big board video, and I think my number 1 could end up being Ted. And that's actually, that's real. He could end up being the number 1 on my big board. Now, the Giants traded down a little bit. You got some better capital for this year's draft and some future capital. You take Shador Sanders. You don't overcomplicate it. You fill a need while also adding more to your pool. And I think that's a trade that in real life they would do every time. Because you get the guy you're going to take at 3 anyway, but you add some depth to what you can do now. Now, for the Raiders and the Jets both, it's kind of a troubling situation because these are two teams that I think will need a quarterback going into this draft. But I think this is also a world where the Raiders pick up Russell Wilson to go with Pete Carroll, and that's that. And I think Pete Carroll is going to like a guy like Will Johnson, 6'2", 202, only a junior, so he's going to be, what did that say, 21.8, so he's only going to be 22 in his NFL rookie season. He is a very good player. He has injury concerns. He has for a couple years, or basically just a year now, but he's a great zone coverage player. This guy is a Raider with Pete Carroll. I think that's just, that one I'm going to lock in pretty much because he fills a need for them. Him and Nate Hobbs, I think, will go very well together, and he's just a great fit for that particular defense. Then we get to the Jets. Like I said, they're going to be pretty mad that they didn't get the quarterback that they wanted, but it is what it is. And, let's default here to their depth chart. This is one thing that we can do here also is we can kind of go over to the depth charts here on our lads. There are going to be some advertisements. I do not have an ad blocker right now. But they have, Hassan Reddick has not played for them still. I think edge rusher is a position they could go after. And when you look, and then interior D-line, you compare someone with Quinnen Williams. When you look at Mason Graham and James Pierce both being available, that's intriguing to me. And I think with Quinnen Williams and Mason Graham together, that defense is pretty damn scary. So that's where we're going to go. They would be a trade down candidate, but I don't know who would want to trade up. Is kind of my biggest question mark in that pick. Like, who do you buy into as the team to be like, yeah, we need to go get Ashton Genty or we need to go get Malachi Starks? I don't really know. Now, for the Panthers, this is a team that I think is in a pick best available player situation on defense specifically. And for me personally, I love Malachi Starks. I really like James Pierce Jr. I really like Benjamin Morrison at times. Mykel Williams is a freak. Walter Nolan's a freak. Mike Green is the best available player in this spot for me on defense. That's who they will take for me. I think Carolina's getting Mike Green, who started at Virginia, kicked out of the program, ended up in Marshall, and man, as you see, 17 sacks this past year, 32 hurries. This kid is dominant, and he was dominating against smaller school competition, but then he came out at the Senior Bowl, put on a show. I mean, look at this rise on the board here. He started out in that 60 to 70 range and has gone all the way up to being a top 10 pick because of how well his season was and also how good his Senior Bowl performance was in the practices. That's a can't miss type of pick for me. That kid will be phenomenal with the Panthers. And I think that's the type of dominant talent that the Panthers have needed to join their roster for a long time. Now the Saints are an interesting one because the Saints are most likely, they haven't actually hired their head coach yet, but they're most likely looking at Kellen Moore. And in a Kellen Moore universe, I do believe offense is where they would want to go. Tight end's a little bit weak. Wide receiver really only has two guys that you even really like, and Rashid Shaheed's coming off an injury year. Chris Olave's coming off an injury year. I would love quarterback for this team. People aren't going to be talking about that like that, but I would love quarterback for this team. I do think you have to kind of target the offense. You have your running back room mostly figured out, having Alvin Kamara and Kendre Miller. I don't think you would take Genty in this spot. I am going to go Luther Burden for this team. Give them another offensive weapon. And this is a guy that, as you can see, plays in the slot quite a bit. He'll be your slot receiver next to Olave. Shaheed can still be your deep threat. I really like the idea. I mean, 508 slot yards this past season. He would be just kind of that sure-handed guy that gets open a lot. That's where I'm going to go for Luther Burden. Now, this is an interesting one for me because I think in most worlds, Will Campbell is not on the board here for the Bears, and I think Ashton Genty would be a phenomenal pick for the Bears. I think it'd be a funny pick, but Will Campbell's on the board. You need offensive line help. He would, in my opinion, he could be the finishing touch on your O-line. You go out and you get Will Campbell in this spot. At number 11, the Niners are another team. Right tackle in particular has been troublesome for them. Now, Kelvin Banks is a left tackle that I think some teams will try to kick inside to guard. But Josh Simmons is a tackle. No ifs, ands, or buts. He is a tackle in this class, and I think he's a great pass blocker. And then Armand Membu is a true right tackle who run blocks his ass off. And I think whenever I debate these tackles, I look at Membu as the best possible fit for the Niners in this spot. But what I also see is I see potential for a trade back where they can still get Membu and get more assets later on. But I think I'm gonna simplify this with the trades just a little bit more because we've already made two. We're gonna just go ahead and take Membu for them because I do think he's a good enough player to go at 11. I really do. Now, another spot we can kind of do the easy thing. Ashton Jeanty is a Cowboy. They needed the running back is their biggest need, and it's not even close. Go get Ashton Jeanty. Let him be the star of your franchise. Now, number 13, we're at the Dolphins. And this is another team with a very interesting offensive line situation. If you look, I mean, I don't love either of their guards. And obviously you have Patrick Paul as kind of like your future-proofing for Teron Armstead, but I don't love that either. Wide receiver's a position they might end up needing. And then you look at the defense, and there's multiple positions where you have free agents. There's multiple positions where you're getting older. I think you're aging out at corner right now. I definitely think you're aging out at corner between Jalen Ramsey and Kendall Fuller. I think both sides of the ball just need talent. Edge rusher's the one spot where you do have Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, Chop Robinson. Like, they're kind of deep at edge rusher. Mo Kamara from last year's draft still kind of lingering around. But outside of edge rusher, this is a squad that could go really anywhere, both in free agency and in the draft. And I think with that being said, this is a team that could kind of just take best available. And in this particular spot, Malachi Starks is best available. I think the Dolphins get Malachi Starks at 13. Javon Holland then can leave. You don't have to pay him necessarily if you do that move. Let me take a swig real quick. Went to the Royal Rumble and my voice is kind of still coming back as time has gone on. But yeah, you get Malachi Starks to replace Javon Holland. Or if you keep Javon Holland, you can still use Malachi Starks in a very good way. Tyler Warren for the Colts at 14 is where I'm going to go. I think edge rusher is a position they could absolutely target, and having James Pierce and Micah Williams both available feels good. But this offseason for Chris Ballard is going to be predicated around trying to make Anthony Richardson work, because if Anthony Richardson doesn't work this year, his job is gone. Tyler Warren is a guy that absolutely will help Anthony Richardson work out. We're talking about a 62% contested catch rate as a tight end, 1,200 yards this past year. And I think the biggest thing that I noticed watching him play is just a level of physicality that you want your tight end to have. And he's kind of a Swiss Army knife type of guy. He can throw the ball well. He can just run the ball. You can just give it to him. I think he's just a guy that would overall like unlock some of what the Colts offense has needed for a long time. Now, this one I'm not going to overcomplicate either. James Pierce Jr. is going to go to the Falcons. I think that their defense needs to get one of these premier first-round talents on it. They needed edge rusher in last year's class. They decided to pass on it to get Michael Penix. Sure, Penix has been a good pick, but imagine they get Jared Verse, how different this team could have looked this season. Go get James Pierce, get a guy that will win off the edge out of Tennessee. This was a guy that going into the year was expected to be the top edge rusher off the board, and almost expected to be the number one pick. I think he's a really good run defender. 81.2 grade definitely plays on tape, and I say that because his size isn't really run defender size. He's going to probably come into the combine no bigger than 245. And for an edge rusher that does run defend as well as he does, you would expect him to be maybe more like 6'5", 260. But he does a good job and he produces well at times. He didn't produce that well all year round this year, but I think he's a guy that you put him in Atlanta with some of the philosophies that Raheem Morris likes to kind of operate with. He would immediately, I think, come in and give you an impact from day one. I think their offense. I mean, you've already drafted. I mean, you went 4 years in a row of drafting a top 10 offensive piece at all four of the major offensive positions that weren't the O line, and your O line was already pretty solid. You got to get some defensive talent. Now, we transition over to the Cardinals. Like I said, Josh Simmons and Kelvin Banks are the two guys that are more like true tackles in this spot. And I think I like Kelvin Banks a little bit more because he does have some guard flexibility with his build and play style. And the Cardinals roster, I think, could use that flexibility for sure. They have guard and tackle both listed as needs. I do think guard is a slightly bigger need than tackle because I do think Jonah Williams is not a terrible right tackle to have. But what this gives you the option to do, Paris Johnson goes to left tackle. You can put you can put Banks at right tackle or at right guard, and then move him to tackle as the years go on, if that were to be the move you wanted to make. Now, there is also the fact that their defensive line has some free agents on it, might not be fully finished out yet. They could use another edge rusher maybe. Like, this defensive front is good, not great to me, especially the interior. And I'm kind of sitting here looking at Walter Nolan and saying, you can go get a guy that's 6'3", 305, and he's had 13 sacks in the last 2 years, 25 hurries this past year, and he had a phenomenal Senior Bowl as well. He'll help you defend the run. He'll help you penetrate in the middle. I think your O-line can be patched up in free agency with as good of a class as it should be with the O-lineman. I think you can just say, you know what, as good as Simmons is, he does have injury issues, as good as Banks has been, we like Walter Nolan a little bit better. Let's go get the dominant interior force to really solidify what your O-line, or what your D-line could be. And then the Bengals are in a similar spot, in my opinion, of like, do you go with the offensive line potential or do you go with the defensive line potential? And the immediate the immediate situation that I noticed that they're in is that their entire starting front seven, pretty much, like their entire core here is older. Their backup guys, like they have two rookie D tackle or two second-year D tackles going into this next year, and they're going to have a 30-year Myles Murphy. But your starters were all a little bit older players or guys that are kind of aging out, maybe contracts are coming up, things like that. Wide receiver is going to be considered a need for this team because you don't know if T. Higgins will still be around. I'm going to operate under the universe that T. Higgins does leave, and in that case, you're definitely considering Igmeka Egbuka because of what he could do as your slot receiver with Jamar Chase on the outside. And I don't hate that for them by any means. But I think as long as you have Jamar Chase, wide receiver isn't going to be your biggest need. The interior of their O-line and the interior of their D-line are both extremely... They're aging out, and I think for what they need and for what I think is the best on the board, for what they need and what I think I prefer on the board, I'm going to go Kelvin Banks for them. Now, this one's a little bit easier for me. The Seahawks are a team that I would love to see go out and add an edge rusher. It has edge listed as a need, and if we look at this depth chart, you can see why. Boye Mafe and Uchenna Nwosu on the edges, and that's pretty much it. That's the depth at edge rusher. You have Byron Murphy in the middle, who was your first-round pick last year. Leonard Williams is still there. Ernest Jones is a free agent, but I think they'll bring him back. You have good corners. They really need one thing on that defensive line, or on that defensive roster, and it's another like dominant edge rusher. Now their offense could use, maybe you don't love what you were seeing from your interior O-line. Maybe you don't love your future wide receiver. But I'm going to go Mykel Williams. Mykel Williams is 6 foot, what is he, 6'5", 265. He's not been the greatest producer, but he's a freak athlete with giant arms, and I think this is a team that I trust with Mike McDonald to kind of make him work. And then, yeah, so now you're in a situation, if you're the Buccaneers, where you also need an edge rusher to some extent. But corner is another position that you really, really like the sound of. And Benjamin Morrison has kind of fallen into your lap. Now, I don't love Benjamin Morrison as like a top 20 pick right now. I am a little bit lower on Morrison than some people. And I am a lot higher than some people on Siobhan Revell, who had an injury. He only played 3 games this past year. He's had injury concerns his whole career. 6'3", 195. He's a very good cover, though. And I think him and Quinyon Mitchell remind me a lot of each other in terms of just being that small school guy that just covers his ass off. I think with the corners that are left on the board, including Jahdae Barron, including Benjamin Morrison, I think I'm going Siobhan Revell over all those guys. I know that definitely differs from Trevor's board. I think the injury concerns are super valid, but I just like the fit way more. The play style, the size, the player. I just like the player a lot. Now, another team that's definitely looking at wide receiver and tight end, looking at weapons, is obviously going to be the Broncos. Emeka to join Bo Nix. You can put him in the slot. You already have Courtland Sutherland on the outside. I actually really, really like that fit for them. We're going to go Emeka Egbuka. Emeka's a guy who, as you can see, played a lot of slot in his career. He's been playing college football for a while. He's going to be 23 pretty early on into his NFL career. He's just a guy that gets open. He's just a smart, consistent receiver. He's never going to dominate a game, but he's going to have really, really good games. And that's been kind of the story of Emeka Egbuka. Now, Steelers here at number 21 could be in the quarterback market. We don't really know where that's going to lie. Wide receiver is a position for them as well, though, that they're going to need to add to because of the situation they're going to be in, only really having George Pickens there. Matthew Golden is a guy that's kind of exploded onto the scene as the year went on. He had a few monster games at the end of the year. Obviously, this was the playoff semis, and he had an 88.9 grade. Good size, but more of a, I would say more of like a route running type. I don't know what his 40 is going to look like. I don't really know a ton about the kid, but I don't know what his 40 is really going to look like. But I do know that his contested catch rate being 61.1 is pretty damn good. He's a good receiver for what I have seen of him. But Alec Iomaner is a guy that I've always really enjoyed because he's a guy that he plays out wide. He's a younger prospect too. A redshirt junior. He's going to be, well, he might not be younger, actually. He might end up being a little bit older whenever he comes in because he's a redshirt junior. Thought he was just a junior. But he produced pretty well these past 2 years. He's a guy that I do really enjoy. But I think I'll go Matthew Golden here to be that wide receiver 2 with George Pickens because they haven't really figured out that wide receiver 2 yet. Now, this opens up an interesting situation for the Chargers. The Chargers could get Benjamin Morrison to add to their defense. They could get an edge rusher here. I think talent for talent, the type of player they're going to like and the type of player they're going to want, they would go Colston Loveland to throw in. Obviously, the Michigan ties with Harbaugh, but you throw him in there with Justin Herbert. I think that's a great fit for the type of offense they're trying to run, and I think he would actually be really, really good for them. Now, Jack Sawyer is a guy that was not a first-round pick up until very recently. Whenever they went on their run, he definitely became that. And I do think edge rusher, they could get one more here, but I think you want a guy more maybe like Nick Scorton, who is 6'4", 285, who can be kind of a hybrid guy if you're the Packers. I wouldn't hate wide receiver for them like Jack Besh or Io Maynor to try to solidify who the number 1 guy is. They obviously could use an interior O-lineman. Gray Zabel will probably play interior at the NFL level. I think corner also, especially with Benjamin Morrison still being here. I mean, yeah, because their room, if I remember correctly, is getting to that point where they're going to need to draft one early on, pretty soon. Yeah, Keyshawn Nixon, because obviously Rasul Douglas left. So it's Keyshawn Nixon, Bullard the rookie. Jair might not even be there next year, the way that things sound. I like Benjamin Morrison to them just for the sake of adding corner talent, because you definitely do not want to go into next year without adding somebody. The way that their room is going to look. I mean, you look at edge rusher, yeah, they drafted Van Ness, they already have Rashawn Gary, Devontae Wyatt in the middle, Kenny Clark in the middle. That team is fine. And the front seven could be okay without a first round pick joining them, and then the O line itself could also be good without a first round pick joining them. I think they'll be all right. Interesting one for the Vikings. I do like the idea of like a Kenneth Grant to them, because I completely agree with the D line need, and Kenneth Grant was very good in run defense. I do think running back could be an interesting spot for them, and my favorite running back that's left on the board, I actually like. Let's see, do they still have Caleb Johnson? Yeah, I actually like Caleb Johnson as my number 2 behind, or maybe not my number 2, like a 2B. Him and Omarion Hampton are like 2A, 2B for me. I don't think you would take Caleb Johnson over Omarion Hampton, especially not for the Vikings. I think for the spot that we're in here, I don't love the defensive prospects. Like the interior D lineman that they would have to take, because I think that's absolutely the spot that they would take or need to take. I think for what I want them to do, your edge rushers are good, but I think Shamar Stewart having that flexibility to, or not Shamar Stewart. Shamar Stewart has it as well. Don't get me twisted. He's bigger than hell. I think Shamar Stewart and Nick Scarton are both guys that have that size and athleticism combo where they can kind of play inside and outside. But let's go Kenneth Grant for them. Let's give them that interior guy to kind of solidify their run defense. Like I mentioned, his run defense grade is ridiculous, and he had some phenomenal games this season stopping the run. He is your B-gapping, big-bodied guy. What is he, 6'3", 340? Texans. This is another interesting team here. You sit back and you kind of look at their offensive line. I don't think Blake Fisher was bad. Obviously, you love Laramie Tunsil, but he is getting older. Shaq Mason's much older. Their interior could use somebody. Now, wide receiver is a good need for them because you do have Stephon Diggs on a contract year, and Tank Dell's broken his leg twice in a row. The defense, I think, is fine. So I think we definitely are just looking at giving them another piece for their O-line. I'm going to go Gray Zabel for them. I think he's a steady, solidified offensive lineman for the interior who can even kick out the tackle if you need him to. Like, let's say Tunsil were to, retire soon. Maybe you kick him out. Blake Fisher could then go to the bench if you needed him to. Got options there. Now, Josh Simmons being the truest tackle in the draft, he will be the pick for the Rams. I think that is the position they'll need the most going into this draft. I like Alaric Jackson. I don't love Alaric Jackson. I think Havenstein was their right tackle this past year, if I'm not mistaken. But they have had injury issues on the O-line for a while now. And I think their interior is damn near perfect with Steve Avila kind of holding it down. So I think getting a new tackle in there, a guy that's played left and right tackle over the years, would be a very good thing for them. Now, this is another fun one. The Ravens, in my opinion, could go wide receiver or edge rusher and be really, really happy. And I think with who's left on the board, a guy like Nick Scorton, a guy like Shamar Stewart, a guy like Landon Jackson, who's a little bit just kind of freaky, 6'7", 280, and just a really good run defender who has some kind of freaky moments on tape. Princely Uman Mielen, 6'4", 255. You love an NFL body out of him. A little bit worse of a run defender, but a great pass rusher. I think for what they need, and this is gonna feel like a crazy pick in a lot of ways, because it is a little bit early, but I think I'm gonna go Princely because of just how dominant of a pass rusher he has been in the college level. I do think he will translate phenomenally. And that's something that they need bad. They need it bad, bad. Now, Josh Connerly got his ass kicked a little bit at the Senior Bowl, but I immediately think about him for the Browns because you obviously traded Myles Garrett for this pick, but you already so you traded Myles Garrett for this pick, but you already took Abdul Carter, so your Myles Garrett replacement is already solidified. Jack Conklin and James Hudson is not, and then Jedrick Wills is also hitting free agency. You're going to need a tackle at either spot. And right now with the tackle board that I'm looking at, it's legitimately, it's either Ariante Ursary, Cameron Williams, Wyatt Milam, Josh Connerly. And I think with the way this board falls out, especially after the Senior Bowl, I like Connerly the best of any of these guys. Even after getting put on his ass by Mike Green, he still had really good tape this season. And he's got left and right tackle size to me. Now, a lot of people are going to put him at guard. I think he played well enough as a pass blocker at tackle where you don't need to put him at guard. But even then, that's not the worst thing ever for the Browns, because if you look at their guard spots, they're aging out pretty bad. Joel Bitonio in particular is like 33, I want to say, at this point. So you can potentially replace your left guard with Josh Connerly. Now, taking him on Mielin for the Ravens opens up the door for the Commanders to go out and get Shamar Stewart. I do think edge rusher is a big position for them. And I think Dan Quinn would love to have a guy that's 6'6", 290 and can seriously rush the passer. But his big thing is going to be his run defense. But I think, he had the 33 hurries this past year in 315 pass rush snaps, and I think Dan Quinn would just love the versatility of a guy that's technically an edge but is that big. I think Dan Quinn would have a lot of fun with him. The Bills, Amari Cooper's a little bit older. Khalil Shakir had a good year. I don't mind wide receiver being listed as a need for them, but the defense just needs talent all around. And it's specifically at corner. Oh, Jesus. Specifically at corner, I think is going to be their biggest spot, and Jahdae Barron still being here for them feels pretty good to me. I think that's actually a position of need for them for sure, and I think that's a spot where they can get a guy that really does fit with them. The Eagles, can the rich get any richer? They're going to get another player that's really, really good with this pick. I'm going to do what they've done in real life almost every single time, and that's just take a freaky athlete who you can kind of move around and figure out what to do with him later on, and that is Jalen Walker. I get that Jalen Walker has fallen out of first-round conversations for a lot of people because his run defense is pretty poor, but this is an edge rusher who's played he's played on the D-line and in the box, both almost equally. He's really not that great in coverage, and his run defense is pretty poor, but I love what he is as a pass rusher. Why not? If you're the Eagles, why not add a guy like Jalen Walker, who's just a freak? And then the Chiefs at number 32, if I had the option to give them the worst draft bust of all time and predict who that would be, I would love to do that just to kind of see how bad it would hurt them. But instead, I look at the Chiefs and what they miss, and a lot of it is just their defense. It doesn't really have... I feel like their defense doesn't really dominate against the run. I feel like it's really easy to run against them right now. I don't really know much about Demetrius Knight. I know that he's Trevor's favorite linebacker in the class and a pretty weak linebacker class. His run defense rate is pretty damn good. 4.3 depth of run tackle is pretty good as well. But missed tackle rate was 10%, which I don't love that for a guy like him. Ezeurakwu could be a good addition to their D-line for just overall just making sure that you're elite at pass rush. Jack Sawyer, same thing. Nick Scorton, same type of thing. But I think with what they need and who they have, I'm kind of looking at Landon Jackson. He's such a good run defender off the edge. You throw him with George Karlaftis. That's very interesting to me. I think, you know what, with the guys that I like the most, let's give the Chiefs Ezeurakwu to give them a dominant edge rush winner. Because obviously we look at their depth chart real quick now that I've already made the pick. And the Chiefs would be sitting there with Mike Dana. Omenahu, I don't know how much longer he'll be with them. I forgot they had Uche. But yeah, you get another guy that can play really good pass rush alongside. I mean, that's just because you're a team where you can really just kind of take whoever you like the most. You know, that's where you're at as a team. You're a team that can take whatever they like the most. Left guard and right guard both, because Trey Smith is hitting the market, could be big needs for them. And I think I left, like, Wyatt Milam would be a pick to mention, but with all that being said, this is the official. Let me zoom out real quick for you guys. This is the official first round mock for me. We get all 32 teams in there. Cam Ward, number 1, the Miami quarterback, to the Titans. Number 2, Abdul Carter to the Browns. Number 3, the Jaguars traded up with the Giants, who moved back to number 5 to get Travis Hunter. The Jags get Travis Hunter at number 3, the corner/wide receiver out of Colorado. The Patriots get Tetairoa McMillan from Arizona, wide receiver, dominant wide receiver. The Giants get Shedeur Sanders. They finally get their QB. Will Johnson and Mason Graham back-to-back to the Raiders and the Jets, the corner and D lineman from Michigan. Marshall's Mike Green, the biggest late riser in the draft, edge rusher, goes to the Panthers at 8. Number 9, wide receiver Luther Burden from Missouri. Number 10, Will Campbell, the tackle turned guard, potentially even turned center, from LSU, goes to the Bears. Number 11, the 49ers get Armand Membu, tackle from Missouri. Ashton Genty is a Cowboy at number 12. Malachi Starks is a Dolphin at 13. Colts get a tight end in Tyler Warren at 14. Edge rusher James Pierce goes to the Falcons at 15. Walter Nolan from Mississippi at 16. Tackle Kelvin Banks goes to help protect Joe Burrow at 17 for the Bengals. The Seahawks at 18 get a freaky athlete edge rusher in Michael Williams. Siobhan Revell from East Carolina goes to Tampa Bay to join the Buccaneers at 19. The lengthy corner from East Carolina. Wide receiver Mecca Ibuka to the Broncos at 20. 21, Matthew Golden, wide receiver from Texas, to the Steelers. Colston Loveland, number 22, to the Chargers, tight end out of Michigan. Cornerback out of Notre Dame, Benjamin Morrison, goes to the Packers. Kenneth Grant, your 4th Michigan player off the board and your last in this particular run, going to the Vikings. Gray Zabel, the all-around offensive line talent, goes to the Texans. True tackle Josh Simmons goes to the Rams at 26. Princely Uman Mielen to the Ravens at 27. Josh Connerly out of Oregon to the Browns at 28. Shamar Stewart at 29 to the Commanders. The Bills get Jahdae Barron, the corner out of Texas. The Eagles get Jalen Walker out of Georgia. And lastly, Donovan Ezekwu goes to championships and hell in Kansas City. That is my first mock draft. I threw in a couple trades. Myles Garrett got flipped to the Lions. Jags and Giants made a little bit of a trade. There should have been more trades, but at a certain point, I was just kind of vibing out and picking. We're still early enough in the process where this is a little bit of both, A, me telling you what I think the positional need should be for the team, and B, me telling you what I would personally do with these squads, not what I think will happen, because I don't think we're close enough for me to really know what's going to happen. But yeah, that was my first mock draft. Hope you guys enjoyed, and if you have any comments, concerns, or questions about any of the players or picks that I made, put them in the comments. If you made it all the way through this video and you saw pick number 32, comment, boy, do I love Reese's peanut butter cups. Put that in the comments if you made it this far. Thank you for watching. STK all day.